What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Here the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic, and very, very busy week overall for Florida State football and Mike Norvell and the staff, and trying to get back on its best groove after a 2-10 season. Florida State announcing a lot of new hires. We've got players leaving. We've got surprise guys going into the transfer portal. We got targets that are coming in, visiting quarterback transfers that are on campus in Tallahassee. We've got a handful of things to talk about this evening. First, we're going to talk about the new hires that Florida State announced with Herb Hand, along with Evan Cooper coming from Nebraska there. And then we're going to talk about Florida State's late signees that they were able to grab into this early signing period. We're going to talk about the Florida State players that are intending on leaving the program, including a conversation about Luke Kromenhoek and a handful of other guys. And then we're going to jump into some quick hitters, including Thomas Castellanos giving a visit to Florida State as we speak. Right now, we're going to talk Jim Phillips and the ACC as they continue to embarrass themselves there. And then we're going to jump into and give our thoughts on Gus Malzahn and Tony White's introductory press conference is today, as we got to hear from those two new coordinators for Florida State. We got a busy one, ladies and gentlemen, on this show. With me this evening is Austin Veazey, our lead basketball writer, and down below is our editor-in-chief, Dustin Lewis. Gentlemen, I mean, like I said earlier, it's been nonstop since the season ended. We knew it would be this way, but I swear, man, these like couple of weeks after the season ends, just in the way how the NCAA schedule works, it is hectic beyond belief.
Yeah, it's been an extremely crazy period when you talk about the end of the regular season, and then you go right into the early signing period. Transfer portal opens up, and now obviously postseason college football is about to happen. So, and FSU going through the coaching carousel, man. So much stuff has been going on these last couple of weeks, and doesn't seem like it's going to be slowing down anytime soon. That's for sure.
No, because we're still waiting on a wide receivers coach to happen at some point. So busy couple of weeks, and it's still going to stay busy until probably at least through the new year, I'd imagine.
100% it will. Before we get started, I do want to thank everybody that's on our YouTube. We hit 15,000 subscribers on here. So yeah, shout out to you guys a ton. We've been growing pretty quickly on this platform. We're putting a lot more focus into this. And I know you guys have seen the last few years, we're on site giving you guys interviews, and also too with our show, trying to do this more consistent and get those instant reactions for you guys after games. But we'll be jumping in and doing a lot more videos all throughout the week. Tons of videos going out with some of these clips, and also too just some quick hitters going out for you guys. But appreciate everybody subscribing there. Before we get started, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell too, so then you get notified every time we release one of those new videos. But yeah, if you're one of those 15,000, thank you. Appreciate it. Got a lot more content coming for you guys on a daily basis moving forward on here. Let's get started, gentlemen. Let's start off with number one, Florida State. This is a massive hire for the Seminoles in so many different ways. But Florida State has found its next offensive line coach with Herb Hand. We had discussed his name quite a bit, gentlemen. But he's got an amount of experience at the collegiate level, spending a lot of time behind Gus Malzahn. As we know, working with Gus over at Auburn, UCF, even going all the way back to his Tulsa days. Mike Norvell gave a lot of praise here on this hire, saying, "I'm excited to bring Herb Hand on staff as our offensive line coach. He has a remarkable career and has demonstrated the ability to develop offensive line units that allow for playmakers to shine. I've seen firsthand his technical expertise and ability to connect with recruits and players to share that knowledge. Having Herb on our staff will be a great benefit to not only our offensive linemen, but the program as a whole." Gentlemen, how do you feel about this hire? And I mean, looking with what Herb Hand has on site with them right now, can Florida State see a decent-sized jump going in this 2025 season in the front trenches for the offense?
Yeah, I really like this move for Florida State because, like you mentioned, Herb Hand, he's been at a lot of different places, and he's been able to build successful offensive lines. And, you know, also the ties to Gus Malzahn really are helpful as well in getting him, and they've been together now for the last 4 years and have worked together at previous stops. You've got the small tie to Mike Norvell with him working together there at Tulsa, where all three of those guys were together. So, a lot of familiarity between these parties. And, with Florida State needing to rebuild this offensive line, you get a guy in here who is really a teacher of the game. And, you heard Mike Norvell in his quote talk about him in the technical aspect. So I think he's going to help build up some of this young talent that Florida State still does have in that offensive line room. And, obviously FSU pursuing some guys in the transfer portal who are tied to UCF as well. And I think having both of these guys, those relationships are going to help Florida State in those potential recruiting battles.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Obviously, you like the familiarity with Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell, but his lines have been somewhat successful, not the best. I did some digging around earlier today, and if you go back and look at some of his teams, the sack rate has always been high. They've always allowed a high sack rate. Granted, they've been a run-focused team, but when they do drop back to pass, it's consistently 6, 7, 8% of a sack rate that they're allowing. They do run the ball very well under his offensive lines, and PFF has loved his grades for the most part. As long as we don't get the Penn State version of Herb because his offensive lines were pretty atrocious there in 2014 and 15. It should be improvement for Florida State, but I argue that they could have done just a little bit better.
I think for FSU, it's all about too who they're going to be bringing in. I mean, the talent that you have on the roster, but then too what you plan on doing in the transfer portal is going to be really, really important, because there was some whiffs. There was not some good pickups for FSU and the trenches. You could probably, I'd point to, I go back to Dylan Gibbons. I think that was a great grab there for FSU. If I'm going into like Dimitri Emmanuel, I'd add into, this last season with Richie Leonard until he got injured. Like, I think Florida State and the non-developmental aspect that sadly Alex Atkins brought to the table, it's kind of just wait and see kind of situation, because, like we'll talk about a guy like Julian Armella. He's one that came in, highly rated recruit, had a lot of SEC schools after him, and we thought that we would see more of him in his career, and we just never got to see the steps taken into improvement to where he could be not even, a second string guy. He was more of a reserve guy during his tenure at Florida State and didn't get to see guys develop. And I think that's going to be the same way we're going to have to see with what Herb Hand can do, developing these guys in such a quick and fast motion in the spring going into fall camp for FSU. They need to get this right for this 2025 season. And definitely when you're talking about what you're going to be bringing in as a quarterback transfer, there's got to be a whole 180 of play in order to attract some of these top transfer targets coming in.
Yeah, there's such a quick turnaround in Florida State. Obviously the worst offensive line in the FBS in 2024, but even still, I mean, you're losing a bunch of those starters, guys who were seniors and things like that. And, you also mentioned Armella, some of those guys hopping into the portal. So FSU, I mean, at the moment, down to 10 scholarship offensive linemen returning in 2025 at the moment. They signed those 2 during the early signing period. But yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, these next couple of weeks with the transfer portal, I mean, FSU is going to need to hit it pretty hard here to add some more depth and, starting level talent to the offensive line room. And I think it's something that you're probably going to have to dip into as well when you're talking about getting to the spring. I mean, they need to add a significant number of bodies. And I think that's a big reason why you're seeing them pursue a bunch of these transfers coming from schools that they're already familiar with, especially with UCF.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument that they need a new start at every single position. Even if you like what you maybe have in Jacob Rizzi, or if some of these guys could get eligibility back, like Richie Leonard with an injury redshirt possibly, even then, I think you'd still like an upgrade at all 5 spots. And that's hard to come by in this day and age of college football, where these guys are going to want a lot of money. And it's not exactly like starter level talent hits the portal very often, especially at the offensive line.
Yeah, it's rare in this day and age. And like you said, you got to back up the Brinks truck to land some of these high-profile offensive linemen, the ones that you're thinking could come in and help instantly turn this thing around. You're going to have to pay a pretty big check for.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump into the next hire that Florida State made, this time on the defensive side of the ball, as Tony White continues to expand around and build his staff on the defense. Florida State announcing Evan Cooper will be Florida State's safeties coach. This now kind of more confirming more than anything, unless something comes up that may happen with a little bit of time, but Coach Surtain expected to be on Florida State's staff moving forward, which is a good thing, coaching primarily there at that cornerback position, and see how that works with the nickels as well. But primarily now Evan Cooper taking on the safeties role, as we know. Previously worked under Tony White, also going to be joining to Terrence Knight. A lot of Nebraska guys coming over just coaching wise, but interested to see how we talk about some of these guys coming in through the transfer portal the next few weeks. But Norvell giving some love here to his new hire with Evan Cooper, saying, "I'm happy to have Evan Cooper joining our Nole family. It's great to have another Dade County native back working in his home state. Our safeties will benefit from his experience and expertise, and he will be a tremendous collaborator with Tony White, Patrick Surtain, and the rest of our defensive staff to reestablish the dominant defense Florida State is known for." I'm incredibly excited for the future here at Florida State. Thoughts on this? Because I'm not entirely sure if we discussed his name a whole ton on here, but I think the biggest part of this is Florida State making a move to add a safety coach here. As we knew previously, though, Adam Fuller took on that role. Yes, he was Florida State's defensive coordinator, but spent a lot of time coaching safeties for FSU. And we'll see how that kind of works for Florida State and what they want to do with Tony White, and if he's going to be doing linebackers and such. But here, Florida State's going to have two coaches in the secondary.
Yeah, we definitely didn't talk about Evan Cooper on here before the hire, because I think, well, I'm speaking for myself, but maybe for you guys as well. Whenever Tony White came in, I think that, I assumed that he'd be working in the defensive backfield as well, since he's got a lot of experience there throughout his career. But instead, they bring in Evan Cooper to man the safeties position. It sounds like Tony White could potentially take on linebacker duties as well. We'll see how all of that shakes out moving forward here. But I mean, yeah, you bring in, a veteran coach, guy who spent time in the NFL and college. And I think really the biggest thing is he's got that connection with Tony White, with Terrence Knighton. They've got that relationship working together at Nebraska. So, they're already very familiar with how each other operate and what they expect from their respective units on that side of the ball. So, I mean, that's going to be important for Florida State to already have that chemistry on the coaching staff between those three. And then, you mentioned it in Norvell's statement, but a Miami, Florida native. And, you look at Nebraska's recruiting over the last couple of years. I mean, they've came down to Florida and taken a couple of highly regarded prospects. So I think getting him, that can just help Florida State get another foot in the door in Miami, where there's just so much talent to recruit.
Well, probably the biggest reason we didn't talk about it is because he wasn't coaching last year. I mean, he resigned before the 2023 season for personal reasons, and we don't have to delve into that. Google's free. But he did resign before the 2023 season, so it's hard to really have his name as a coach, at least on our end. It just wasn't someone on our radar. But when he's been a coach, he's been very successful. I mean, Nebraska's best defense in the last 10 years came when he was at that safeties coach, and that secondary was flying around the football field. The season before this past one, the Carolina Panthers defense was really good when he was their cornerbacks coach. Baylor's defense was good when he was there. He's always had good secondaries under his helm. Just hopefully the personal reasons are out of the way. I'll just say that.
And I think also with this move, obviously Pat Surtain going into his third year at Florida State, this kind of keeps him in that same spot where he's already gotten familiar with over the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that helps a lot. And I like having two coaches back there anyways, because now in the art of being a defensive coordinator and what you have to deal with on what these offenses are doing to you, more coaches the merrier, definitely in the secondary. This is what Cooper said in his statement, saying, "I'm excited to join the Florida State football program. FSU has an elite history among the best programs in college football, and I'm looking forward to working with Coach Norvell and the rest of the staff. I can't wait to get started with our players and contribute to upholding the DBU legacy." But yeah, there's a lot of work to it for him to do as well, getting into Tallahassee and seeing what he's got on that roster in the safeties room, because there is a lot of young talent. And when we talk about the pressers from today, it was talked about a ton from both sides of Gus Malzahn and Tony White, that there is a lot of young talent to work with now after seeing a good amount of film, because Florida State and Mike Norvell put a lot of those younger players out there this last season. So, yeah, I'm interested to see how it looks, and it's kind of hard to judge anything definitely as a safeties coach. But if things that safety position is very important for Florida State, and we've seen some studs come through there as Cooper's saying there with that DBU legacy.
Yep, we'll see how things shake out, but Florida State, getting closer to finalizing that on-field staff. Seems like right now the real question marks are, obviously at wide receiver, where Florida State hasn't made a hire yet, and then what they decide to do at the linebacker position.
Mm-hmm. I say we jump into some more signings, because we were keeping an eye on these after early signing day, at least on Wednesday, began. But as we know, it doesn't fully complete until the end of the week. And Florida State having a really nice Friday kept you busy, Dustin, as if this week wasn't busy enough. But Florida State is landing 2 defensive ends, which is just crazy to think of when going through the past history of what the staff has dealt with multiple times, but also kind of did to themselves. I'm losing out on defensive ends, it feels like, on big days like this. But Florida State making some moves, flipping 4-star defensive end Tylen Lee from Ole Miss, 6'4", 245 pounds, ranked as the number 278th player overall, number 29th defensive lineman, and number 41st recruit in Florida per 247 Sports. He totaled 87 tackles, 40 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, and 3 pass deflections as a senior this last season. But it's a little late early signing day fun, D-Lou.
Yeah, it's a huge pickup for Florida State, and you kind of glossed over that number. 40 tackles for loss in one single season. I mean, it's insane. You go and put on some of this kid's film, it's just not fair. I mean, the competition that he's going up against, he makes the offensive line just look like little kids. I mean, 6 foot, he's got to be more than 245, I would imagine. But, he's dominant on that film and a very physical guy off the edge. And I think the thing about him that impresses me the most is just the hustle. He's willing to pursue sideline to sideline to make some of these tackles, coming from the backside of the play to catch up with a running back after he's already received the handoff and go in the opposite direction. So some really impressive athleticism and just the energy and hustle that pops up from him. It's a good pickup for Florida State. The need at defensive end right now, obviously pretty high. We're going to talk about Marvin Jones Jr. hitting the portal later in the episode, and still don't really know what the future of Patrick Payton is at Florida State, and a couple of other defensive ends from the program have also entered the portal. So there's a big need in Tallahassee right now, and to get a guy like this, I think there's a chance that he could play early for the Seminoles.
Real quick, I know you said his rating was in the 200s or whatever, but on 3, he's the 71st ranked player. So on 3 is much, much higher compared to everyone else here. So I would like to think he's the 71st best player, but I guess that's an argument for a different day.
We'll go with the best. We'll be like the program. We'll be like the football program and write down whoever ranks them the best or higher. Yeah, I mean, y'all aren't wrong. We're about to talk about another one here. I mean, Florida State's got to do a big time job in the defensive end room and pass rush, and interested to see what Tony White puts together, because attacking the backfield is huge under him. But going to another land that we had talked about pretty heavily on here, Dustin, is LaJesse Harold, a 4-star defensive end that signs with Florida State. He was previously committed to LSU and the Tigers with Brian Kelly. 6'5", 215-pound defensive end, ranked as the number 13th edge in the 2025 class and number 146th overall per 247 Sports. Also a multi-sport athlete, basketball and track and field. So this guy is just kind of maybe a freak a little bit. But tell us a little bit about this commitment for FSU.
Yeah, another, really important grab for Florida State when you're talking about the future of that defensive end room. I think LaJesse Harold, probably going to take a little bit more time for him to get on the field just because of the frame, listed at 6'5", 215 pounds. We'll see if Florida State's able to pack some more weight on there for him, but he's going to need to add some more pounds and just continue to develop early in his career. But yeah, you kind of brought up a 3-sport athlete, very athletic. He's got a high ceiling, some fun tools to work with. And he's another guy where I feel like the energy and the hustle really show up on tape. So, both of these guys, Harold and Lee, can reach their potential. You're talking about a really good defensive end room here in a couple of years at Florida State. But, as we've seen, you've got to retain those guys as well once you do get them on campus and begin to develop them. So
Now, where did Florida State begin early signing day in the rankings per 247 Sports? Were they in 40s?
So they were, I can't give you the exact number, but they were around that number 47 to number 52 mark. And then you
Okay.
climb all the way up to number 20 in the country with that commitment of Harold, the 20th signee for Florida State in the early signing period. And who knows? I mean, with the way that things are going, and obviously the 105-man roster limit, and some more guys that could leave from Florida State, depending on what they do in the portal, they could potentially try to add a couple more prep prospects in February during that traditional national signing day.
I mean, I got to give props to Florida State staff here. I mean, that was not easy to do whatsoever with everything that you're having to deal with all across the board. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, we were hearing from Mike Norvell during the press conference talking about the new signees coming in, and you can tell that not a big fan of what the schedule and what the NCAA has. But I mean, just where Florida State's situation's at, and to go through all that, but then for also to kind of the stigma for Florida State's staff under Mike Norvell is some pretty rough early signing days and just some misses and whiffs and some things happening. Yes, you did lose out on your top commit from in your class, but you also hadn't named an offensive line coach there. Talking about Solomon Thomas, like there's understandable things to where, yeah, Florida State shouldn't have a great day, but they ended up doing a lot better and doing more and putting together some pieces that they need moving forward in some regards. So I got to give props to that staff.
But it is funny, right? Because, this is the worst high school class that Florida State has signed under Mike Norvell, but you walk out of the early signing period, with a positive perception just because of how bad it was after the season. I mean, Florida State, they had 10 guys flip from the program since the beginning of September, and they were able to pull off this run down the stretch and, add some pieces that could be good, but still, it's a good class, but not as good maybe as it's being made out to be at the moment. But still, Florida State, they addressed some needs there. They brought in 20 guys, and we'll see if some of these guys are able to grow and become good players at Florida State.
Mm-hmm. Before we jump into the transfer portal for Florida State, losing some guys there and surprise one from Luke Kromenhoek, make sure you hit that like button down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, I highly suggest you do that. Tons of videos dropping on a daily basis as we speak, but appreciate everybody hanging out with us this evening. Let's jump into Florida State's transfer portal. Man, oh man, it is going wild right now. Now counting up to 15 scholarship players that have entered on FSU's side. And I say
it's only day 3.
Yeah, it's only day 3. I say I'm going to name these out, and then we'll pick some players that we would like to jump further into. And we'll start off here with number 1, Luke Kromenhoek. The news breaking yesterday that he was intending on entering the transfer portal, which he ended up confirming just about 30 minutes later on his Instagram story. And I'll bring up the statement from him in just a minute. Also, wide receiver Dustin Hill. Another wide receiver, Darion Williamson. Tight end, Jackson West. Tight end, Brian Courtney. Tight end, Jarrell Powers. Offensive lineman, Julian Armella. Defensive end, Marvin Jones Jr. Defensive end, Byron Turner Jr. A lot of juniors here I'm finding. Defensive end, Lamont Green Jr. Then linebacker, Omar Graham Jr. Linebacker, DeMarco Ward. Defensive back, Marlon Cooper, as we know, coming back from or going to Colorado, then coming back to FSU. And then defensive tackle, Tomiwa Dorojawe. Who do we want to start off with? Let's go with number 1 here, who we started the conversation. Luke Kromenhoek entering the transfer portal. Kind of came to a surprise. I know, VZ, you and I jumped in and did a quick hitter on that for our YouTube people, but y'all's thoughts on this when this came out, because now Florida State only having one, until Kevin Sperry comes in, one scholarship quarterback on its roster, and that is Brock Glenn.
Yeah, it's a disappointing ending to Luke Kromenhoek's time in Tallahassee, and it really felt like it came out of nowhere. I mean, this is the guy who was recruited to be the future of that quarterback room, and someone that Mike Norvell, Tony Tokars, and Florida State, they've invested a lot into over the years. I mean, you think back to even when they went out and found him, before his sophomore season, hadn't started a game at the high school level at this point, was a backup to former Auburn signee Holden Grenier, and, was contributing at wide receiver, on defense, on special teams, comes to a camp at Florida State, throws, impresses the coaching staff, gets offered on the spot, like I said, before he's even started a high school game. And Florida State sticks with him from there. He commits the following season, before his first year as a starter, going into his junior year at the high school level. And then, he blossoms into what Florida State thought he would be that junior and senior season, one of the top quarterbacks in the country. And, we got to see some of that potential on the field here at Florida State this season. Obviously, some ups and downs, and a true freshman going up behind a very poor offensive line. And, frankly, I think everyone's seen it. There's been some rumors out there, and Luke Kromenhoek's family is denying that he requested a certain NIL number, and, other people are insisting that he did. And at this point, it's a little bit of a he said, she said situation, but, either way, it's a very tough loss for Florida State, and one that I don't think that they thought they would have to deal with whenever the offseason began. But, we're seeing Florida State pursue transfer quarterbacks, and you have to wonder if that kind of caused a little bit of a problem here.
Yeah, my thoughts haven't changed too much since the video we did Tuesday night. Really just depends which report you want to believe on, whether it's the money or whether it's he doesn't believe he fits in this offense, which I can understand the latter part. But at the same time, he's, as I said yesterday, he's an extremely raw quarterback, and I'm not sure he'd start at many power conference places tomorrow. It's going to take him a year or two of development to reach that ceiling and be a consistent quarterback, and that's just it's the fact of the matter. And I think he could really benefit by sitting behind one more year and just learning. But a lot of these kids want to get on the field right away. So if that is the reason, I somewhat understand. But at the same time, they also need to be somewhat realistic with where he is today.
Yeah, and I will say, if the NIL is the case, and you see the kid enter the transfer portal, I think at that point, it's gone too far. We saw some things last year, from certain guys at Florida State, whether they did declare to enter the portal, whether it was thought that they were going to enter the portal, and then FSU did their part to retain those players, and a lot of them didn't perform very well in 2024. So I think at a certain point, Florida State, Mike Norvell, they've got to put their foot down, and you might lose some players that are very talented on the field, but you want to have the right guys in that locker room as well.
As I said yesterday, can't be held hostage by anyone from a 2-10 team. If they don't want to reach the number, goodbye. You clearly weren't good enough to impact the team last year.
Yeah, and you got to hope the team learned. That's what we talked about earlier in that episode that you and I did, Austin. Hope that staff learned from the year prior that you cannot allow some of these players to hold you hostage in these situations. And it got really, really sticky this last year at this time when you saw some of these veterans that were tweeting, and you saw some teases that they were going to enter the transfer portal or find somewhere else. And you saw some of these just weird kind of vague tweets, and you just knew where that was heading direction wise. And Florida State can't be held by that anymore. And Luke, going to Luke, we actually were there for we were not there, but whenever Luke, it was Charles Lester's commitment, and we were there for that. Luke and his family traveled a good amount of ways there for that, and got to see Charles Lester commit. And Luke was a big pivotal role in building that special 2024 class together. And you could see the reaction. We saw it from Cam Davis. I think he put up an Instagram story not too long ago with the broken heart emoji, and you can tell that definitely hurt him, losing one of his closest friends and teammates also too. Jordan Travis, he quoted my tweet to the reaction of Luke intending on entering the transfer portal, and was shocked by that as well. So yeah, I think the team and some of his closest friends definitely hurt by this decision to go this route. And if it's NIL, if it's playing time, yada, 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 I think going to the last two games of the year, he did start those last two games, But, in those practices, it was about who was going to be performing the best against Charleston Southern would get that start. And then, Mike Norvell gave him the keys to keep running with it and go against the Gators. And, I mean, there's only so much you can really do to coming out of a 2-10 season with a garbage 0 offensive line to help develop any kind of quarterback. But Tua, does he fit the scheme? Does Gus think he fits the scheme the best? How do those conversations go? Yes, he's athletic and yes, he's got some speed, but does it really fit as a dual threat quarterback that Gus likes to have in his system? That's where, and also too, the next thing is Mike Norvell has to win in 2025. This can't be to where you're dependent on another. I would still place him as a very young freshman quarterback because of the limited amount of playing time he did get this last season. It was just so sporadic until the latter half of the year. Mike has to win in 2025. And in order to do that, in my opinion, it's got to come with a veteran, experienced quarterback that has to come in and run through the system that Gus Malzahn is going to be bringing to the table. So I guess I gave more of some detail on my end of things. But I don't know. That's the situation that Florida State's now in with only having one scholarship quarterback. They're most likely got to bring in what? One? Could they bring in 2 now? I mean, it's so limited, and all you have is a true freshman quarterback with Kevin Sperry coming in to add on to your second guy in the room.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it's hard enough to get 1, let alone 2 in this day and age. I think being able to get 1 through the portal and 1 in your high school signing class, that's probably the best way that you can do it with the way that, football has quickly changed over the last couple of years and guys are looking to jump in and play immediately. If a guy's transferring, he's transferring to go somewhere and play and start. So I think, if you're looking to get 2 quarterbacks out of the portal, it just kind of seems like a little bit of a pipe dream. But Florida State, after missing on DJU last year, this is the same thing with the offensive line. This is a critical thing that you have to get right. And, I know we're going to get into some Thomas Castellanos talk, but I mean, Florida State, if they do end up making this move, they've got to be absolutely positive it's going to work out. Because like you just said, Mike Norvell's job is very well on the line in 2025, depending on how Florida State performs.
And you know what, too, and I'll end it here on Luke. And it's hard to do this with Florida State's offensive line, so I'm putting that out there, and I don't think anybody could do it unless you're like Michael Vick or Jordan Travis. But let's say Luke was playing the caliber of DJ Lagway down there at UF and the Gators, and he was showing, okay, wow, things are clicking, things are getting down, things are working. And of course, too, the offense was clicking a lot better than what Florida State had this year. But still, overall, let's say he's making a lot of these splash plays, or there's a lot of consistency there with growth with the amount of time that he was out there on the field, then I think there's better conversations of, okay, maybe there is upping there in the NIL number and certain things, but just some of the numbers that were thrown around and tossed around, that's just that can't work off of what you saw in 1 year with the putrid offense, and wasn't just phenomenal. True freshman quarterback play as well. He looked like a true freshman, and I don't think that's worth throwing so much money into that whenever you need to use some of your money in different departments and a heavier amount, and to adding on to what you're going to be bringing in as a transfer quarterback.
He also fumbled 4 times against Florida. Like, that's an insane amount of fumbles. One's whatever, true freshman quarterback going up against SEC defense. 2, I mean, you don't like it, but again, true freshman quarterback against an SEC defense. 4 fumbles is ridiculous. I don't care what level of football it is, who you're going up against. 4 fumbles from the quarterback's ridiculous, and that's why they didn't want to potentially up that NIL deal. It's pretty much as simple as that.
But I will say, if he was showing the flashes of a DJ Lagway and, you're seeing different things, you're like, all right, if we get a piece here and a piece there, this guy's going to be really good. In another year, he's going to be better at this and that. I just don't think that you saw as many of those flashes from Luke that prove, that he's going to be something special at the college level. He definitely has the ceiling. Yeah, he's got the ceiling. He's got the potential, but he's just so raw that he still needs more time to develop and hone in on certain things. I think DJ Lagway, obviously a little more advanced in some of those aspects. But if they were seeing that type of thing, I think, they wouldn't even be looking for a transfer quarterback. But obviously, Florida State knows, and Mike Norvell knows, they need someone that can come in and win now, and they don't want to have to guess, going into the season, making this projection, that projection. They need someone who's done it already.
Well, too, we were never supposed to see Luke Kromenhoek hit the field this year. I mean, Mike
Right.
Norvell told us that after that UF game. There was younger guys that he did not want to put out there on the field, but he forced himself to where he had to do that whenever you had a veteran transfer quarterback and DJU not be able to do anything for you. And, Brock Glenn and things weren't clicking there as well. Kind of were forced to do that, but Luke wasn't supposed to see the field this year. And I think, we got to come back down a little bit and just go back to where some of these younger guys need time to be developed. And, there's a lot of rushing in this new NIL space, and the way college football is, it's speeding up all these brains, and it's always been sped quickly in a player's mind. But then whenever we have money introduced into things and contracts, and then you've got family talking and things, brains are sped so quickly. Just let the young guy develop. And interest. I'm sure he's going to get a lot of interest from a lot of Power 4 schools across the country, but you still got to develop him. Very raw. Let's go to another name here that I want to bring up. Omar Graham Jr., linebacker, veteran guy who we saw a slower start to that 2024 season, but then ended up being a really nice player for Florida State that we got to talk about on Saturdays, which we didn't get to name a lot of guys on Saturdays that we like seeing some good play from. But Omar Graham Jr. was doing that for us, and was all over the place, and was making PBUs in the red zone, or definitely two in the end zone. He was making some stirring a little bit of a conversation for us of, hey, this is a guy that you would really like to retain moving forward, but he has put his name into the NCAA transfer portal.
Yeah, it's another one where, I didn't see it coming, especially Florida State making the transition to the 3-3-5 defense under Tony White. It seemed like Omar Graham Jr. could have had a role there at Mike linebacker, and, potentially played a lot for Florida State in 2025. Like you said, struggled early in the season, but then we saw him rebound and become one of the more consistent linebackers on the team during the second half of the year. Some ups and downs, but he did show some good growth during his third year at Florida State, and, started to capitalize on some of that potential that we had seen in the past. And, he had a career year, and you've got to wonder, now he's taken a visit to Nebraska and I believe Kansas. Will he blossom at another program and reach that level that he had a chance to get to in Tallahassee? But, either way, a tough loss for Florida State, especially when you're looking at the number of linebackers coming back right now for the Seminoles in 2025. It's getting slim.
It's thin. It's very thin.
If you had asked me in September, I would have been like, oh yeah, Omar Graham's gone. He can hardly play on the field. But by the end of the season, he was playing pretty well. He was arguably Florida State's best linebacker after Juice Cryer got hurt. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think he actually might be missing that linebacker room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's thin. There's not a lot of guys in there that Florida State experience-wise. It's thin. It's going to be another one of those things we're going to be keeping a close eye on, and what Florida State does in the transfer portal. I want to bring up a name here that just kind of stings. It kind of hurts when it dropped, and that was Dustin Hill. And
did it though? It didn't really sting me. I'll be honest.
Well, it's more of the joy.
You're cold-blooded.
Yeah, he's cold-blooded. He's capping.
But it's part of how I felt after the horrible basketball season 2 years ago. Like, yes, is there a player I like in the transfer portal? Sure. But again, it's a 2-10 football team. I'm not going to be that upset about anybody leaving.
So Luke wasn't bad. Wasn't a bad loss.
No, it really wasn't. Like, is it ideal? No. Do I care? No.
This one stings more though because of the waiting game that we played and the storyline. We thought that maybe Florida State at the end of this they'd reach a national championship. We'd see Dustin Hill be bringing back a punt return or a kick return, and to be the seal of the deal, pull another Kermit Whitfield. But this the story seems to be over potentially. Who knows? It might go on for a couple more years, but right now with Florida State not naming a wide receivers coach, and who knows what else. I think too the injury plays a role in this as well. I'm interested to see how that's going on and the rehab process for him. But someone that had some crazy film, as we know, looking at his high school days and just picturing what could have been in Mike Norvell's offense as a playmaker, and you saw a little bit of signs of that in games. It's definitely a little bit of a stinger.
It's a sad ending to just a crazy ass saga, over the last couple of years. Signing Dustin Hill, your top recruit in that 2021 class, not getting him to campus until 2 years later. And then, as a true freshman, a couple years removed from high school, he instantly jumps into that rotation for Florida State, provides a little bit, was banged up some in 2023, and then, suffers the ACL tear during spring practice and out for the season. So it just, it sucks that you never really got to see him out there living up to his full potential of what people thought he could be. It did seem like he was making some good progression from that injury throughout the last couple of weeks. Whenever we were out there at those practices, he was an active participant in the rehab and just seemed to be making some hurdles towards that return potentially. And, we'll see if he is able to get back fully healthy and where he does end up. But yeah, from what you thought Dustin Hill was going to be a couple of years ago when he signed from Florida State to now, I think it's just disappointing to see how everything ended up.
Yeah, it says he played in 10 games in 2023. I don't actually believe that because I feel like he was more banged up than that. And, maybe he played a couple snaps. I feel like for the most part, he was pretty banged up in that 2023 season. But for his career, 6 catches for 87 yards. I just don't think Florida State's going to miss that. And as I tweeted, when the announcement was made, anybody that's been coached by Atkins or Dugans for more than 2 years probably isn't worth saving at this point. So
yeah. This was only year 2 and he didn't play.
But he was still in that room learning from him every day.
Got the Dugans disease.
Got the Dugans disease.
But now wide receiver room as well. I mean, we're talking about the defensive end room, the linebacker room, the wide receiver room, the offensive line room. I mean, man, they are thin.
Yeah.
It is good that Florida State signed those 4 guys during the early signing period, but they definitely need some experience and to land a top pass catcher or multiple top pass catchers during this transfer portal period.
Hopefully my mic isn't registering the amount of
it is.
God knows what's going on outside. I've got helicopters, I've got firefighters, I got ambulances, police cars, I've got SWAT teams, I've got the Navy SEALs, I've got everything on my road right now. I don't know what's happening, but I hope we're not getting an attack. And I'm hearing banging. I don't know what's going on outside in downtown.
Probably make sure you shouldn't evacuate or something, dude.
What is happening? Now I'm having street racing noises going down. So maybe we're getting like a live chase, maybe. Potentially something is going crazy out there, but we keep moving. I want to mention one more name, or actually 3 on here. There's going to be 3 legacy players on this roster moving on from Florida State. Marvin Jones Jr., Lamont Green Jr., and Julian R. Mella. Those 3, they are not going to continue their careers at Florida State. Marvin Jones Jr. this year, I don't know if I really saw him out there at times. I kind of forgot that he played in some of the games when we would go back and look at the stats and see how many snaps he actually got. But definitely very underwhelming in his one and only season for Florida State. Just didn't work out, man. And it just no play, no physicality, wasn't a threat off the edge, kind of lackadaisical, it felt like. Just, a little bit different than his pops.
Yeah, didn't work out. I think we all thought that him making that transition back to a 4-3 scheme and playing the traditional defensive end spot, that would kind of play to his strengths. But, once again, I mean, just like the other side of the defensive end rotation, it was a complete disappointment for Florida State. And, neither Marvin Jones Jr. or Patrick Payton lived up to the expectations that we had for them coming into 2024. And, just disappointing to see, especially, whenever you land one of these legacy players, you're hoping that they can come in and make a similar impact to, the father or the family member that came before them. And, you just didn't get that from Marvin Jones Jr. And, as far as the other three guys, you mentioned Julian Armella just wasn't able to develop during his time here, and Lamont Green Jr., only in his second year at Florida State, and he's already moving on. But he was someone that had to continue bulking up that frame, and, obviously didn't play very much for Florida State in 2024.
Yeah, I feel a little ridiculous that both Logan and I picked Marvin Jones Jr. to be our Defensive Player of the Year. Big swing and a miss on that one. Gotta say it. Hand up, my bad. Somehow he finished with 25 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. I don't know when those came because I don't remember a single one of those. Not only was he just absent from most plays, he just, like you guys said, he lacked the physicality and just isn't going to fit a 3-3-5 whatsoever. Granted, I don't know what he will fit playing how he does. Same. And, I do like Boots. I wish he could have put on another 20 or 30 pounds, but if he hasn't done it by now, I don't know when he will.
Yeah, that and injuries really slowed his step there on growth, putting on some size, because Coach Storms and them, they were working pretty well on that, but that injury definitely hurt him a little bit. All right, let's move on real quick with some other guys that are departing the program, not into the transfer portal, but they're going to be heading into the league. Azrae Thomas, as you just mentioned just a couple seconds ago, Dustin, Joshua Farmer, and Darrell Jackson have entered their name into the 2025 NFL draft. Azrae Thomas, I think, was really, after a couple of games and started noticing how bad this football team was, he was one of the few that, still just showing what he has and his physical attributes and just a style of play that he brings. There's definitely some promise for him to have a good career moving forward into the pros if everything works out well, and he'll probably test really nicely too with his athleticism and size and length. And then Joshua Farmer and Darrell Jackson, definitely Farmer most likely getting an opportunity there to see where things go for him, and we'll see what happens with Darrell Jackson. But these three going ahead and calling it a career in Tallahassee and moving on to the pros.
I don't think this is a surprise to any of us. I think we basically all projected all three of them to probably go to the NFL following the 2024 season. Probably thought it would come under different circumstances, but either way, now they're moving on to the pros. And, in my opinion, I think AZ has probably got the best chance here just with everything that he showcased in Tallahassee. We'll say I think he got snubbed this year. He's playing on the 2-10 football team. I understand that, but to only get an honorable all ACC mention, for what he did, played the most snaps on FSU's defense by far, was very productive in coverage, didn't get targeted very often. And, I thought he should have had a little bit more respect with what he did in 2024, but I think he'll perform well at the combine and any postseason events that he decides to attend. And then, we'll see with Joshua Farmer and Darrell Jackson, but they certainly have the size to get drafted. I think they still have some potential that can be tapped in their games. And, the combine, the interview process is going to be a very important period for all three of these guys.
Yeah, it seems the general consensus is AZ is more than likely a day 2 pick. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he ends up sneaking in the back end of the first round, because a lot of teams need corners. And it's not a very good draft this year. And he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the skill set, and he's got good film. Even going back to the 2023 season when he was rotating in for Fentrell and Nardo, he put up some good film. Has some inside-outside versatility, has some slot film. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see him climb up those charts. Jackson and Farmer, we'll see. They entered the season with top 100 ideals, I guess. With the dreams of going to the top 100, I don't know how likely that is. I think Jackson's too big, fast, freaky for him to not get drafted. Farmer, we'll see.
Yeah, that Darrell picks up some of his technique as well. He does play so damn high, but you got to hope that can be coached. And two, going back to AZ, look what Surtain has put into the league with Renardo Green, the success that he's finding there for the 49ers. And also, too, Jarian Jones just had one of his best weekends of football there playing for the Jaguars and recording his first sack. in his NFL career. I mean, there
Well,
is.
it was Will Levis. Let's not get too carried away.
Hey, sack's
Still
a sack.
counts.
All that matters is in the box score in the NFL. I don't care who it's against. As long as it's not Russell Wilson, we good out here. We good. By the way, thank you, Jameis. I appreciate the win. I know we talked about it, but thank you. Needed that. Continue that Brown streak of not being able to go 2-0 on the season for us, going all the way back to the 1980s. Thank you, Jameis. Let's talk about Thomas Castellanos, gentlemen, because he's a guy that we've been talking about on every episode, and it seems like we're going to continue to do that, and we'll see if that continues going into the fall with Thomas Castellanos, former Boston College quarterback, visiting Florida State this week. Really, as we speak at this moment, I'm sure they're having some dinners. Where are you taking Castellanos to dinner, Dustin? We're asking the best person here for this. I mean, maybe not, but where
I used to know where they took
Castellanos
him.
for dinner?
Maybe like a table 23,
Table 23.
where you get them
That's
up there to Shula's for just a really expensive steak.
Okay.
No, I know they've added some new places recently around here that are supposed to be fancier.
Nice.
Can't remember the name, but
Great.
either way, there's a couple spots.
Okay. But yeah, no, Castellanos visiting Florida State is this is important. We talked about it earlier. Florida State's got to find a veteran quarterback that can come in and run Gus Malzahn's offense. But I ask you guys, because we've already talked about Castellanos plenty of times last few weeks on here, but is this the guy? And should Florida State get this done early? We're talking get this locked down and definitely before the end of the month, I'm thinking even the middle of the month before we reach December 15th. Should they go into lockdown now, or should they play the patient game and wait for some other names to enter?
I don't know. It's hard to say. In my opinion, I think Florida State. In my opinion, I think Florida State should probably keep the options open. With what I think is going to happen is that Thomas Castellanos is going to be Florida State's next quarterback, and you've got the ties to Gus. He was also there at UCF when Herb Hand was there. Mike Norvell recruited him out of high school and has played against him the last 2 years. So they know what Thomas Castellanos brings to the table. They're very familiar with his game, his skill set. And, I think FSU and Gus Malzahn believe that they can bring him in and, have him reach that potential and get back to what he was doing in 2023, but also with increased passing efficiency as well. If you can combine his 2024 passing numbers with his 2023 rushing numbers, sure, that looks a little bit better on paper.
I'll say this. I'm liking it more and more. The more I think about it, the more you watch 2023 Thomas Castellanos, because a lot of fans that don't know ball on Twitter or just post a picture of his stats from this last season and go, look, he sucks. Well, Bill O'Brien came in as trying to establish this pro-style offense, and that's just not Castellanos. But if you go back to that 2023 season, he was dynamic. Ran for over 1,000 yards, got in the end zone a bunch. Now, you do want to see some of that passing efficiency, and I think he can get there. But he's going to fit Gus's offense super well. We know he's quick. We know he's electric. We know he can run the football, and that's what this offense wants to do. They want to run the football, not just with running backs, but with their quarterbacks as well. I don't know how many other options that'll come available that fit Gus's offense better than Castellanos. I just don't.
And I will say something that does make me a little bit more open to it is I figured out that Castellanos has 2 years of eligibility remaining. So, I mean, if Florida State does bring him in, you've got a chance to ride with him for the next two seasons.
If we're comparing it to last transfer cycle as well, I would love this way more than I did DJU, because I was not a big DJ fan in that cycle last year. I wanted Cam Ward. I was very adamant about that, and then tried to save grace by saying, maybe DJ could work. I really think Castellanos could be a good fit in Tallahassee.
And you go back and what you saw with Jordan Travis and the success he had offensively matching this now with Gus and bringing in Castellanos, a guy who was very, very fun to watch in 2023. I mean, I was watching games of his even when Florida State wasn't facing against him, and just we would see the highlights as well all throughout Saturdays. And Castellanos is a playmaker. He's got the speed, and yeah, get the little passing efficiency up a little bit. But I think the next thing I'm seeing all over Twitter is, he quit on the team. He quit on the team, but there's a lot of things that I think go on as we're, watching the whole situation develop and unravel with Luke Kromenhoek as well. There's a lot of different things that go into where a quarterback decides to enter the transfer portal. And like y'all mentioned, new coach coming in for Boston College and changing some things up. Things like that are going to happen, and this guy is a talented quarterback. I'm just interested to see if Florida State wants to play a little bit more of a patient game and see what opens up there. I would like to see where Florida State says, hey, let's make some kind of verbal agreement or something here to where, Castellanos is leaning Florida State's way, and just give a little bit of time to let some of these playoff games go by and see what might open up an opportunities. But Castellanos is right here in Tallahassee and visiting, and seems like Florida State's in a really good spot.
And just one more note on the Bill O'Brien front. I get the feeling that Castellanos left the team because Bill O'Brien kind of ran him out of town, because that's those people at Alabama. He tried to do the exact same thing with Jalen Milroe, try to convince him to switch positions or transfer either way. And I won't say Jalen Milroe was elite this year, but he was a very, very, very good quarterback for Alabama. And clearly he just has to have the right coordinator, right system. Bill O'Brien just isn't that for running quarterbacks. It's just not.
Moving on to the next topic is actually, no, before I actually go to that, I want to bring up something that happened. I think it was Saturday morning during College Game Day when Jim Phillips, ACC's commissioner, jumped on to the broadcast, because I guess that's the new thing in our era of college football for the commissioners to get 5 to 10 minutes of TV time and try to advocate for why some of their teams should be in the playoff, which we never got any of that whenever Florida State was going through that whole thing there, where they got snubbed last season. But Jim Phillips messing up, though, and thinking that Jordan Travis is actually still playing college football. He left the New York Jets and plays for SMU along with also to Miami. This is a quote that he said on TV in front of everybody. And I think Zach Blostein from 247 tweeted out the video, but it says, this is him. There's two teams in the 68 Power 4 schools that went undefeated in the conference, the Oregon Ducks and the SMU Mustangs. Last year, we suffered having to hear about Jordan Travis and Miami not being the same. Well, it cuts both ways. Since Jordan Travis took over, they're 9-0. They have more Power 4 wins than Texas does. What
we don't need to hear the rest of this quote. This dude sucks. Get him in a mental facility. Get him out of Charlotte, please. In all fairness, we tried saying this last year, and everyone else in the ACC, I was like, you guys suck. You guys are just complaining because you missed. No, this just is not a good commissioner. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He just doesn't. And now the rest of the ACC and the rest of the country is finally seeing, hey, maybe this guy kind of sucks, because he does.
It's silly. It's so bad. And man, I was wondering if he was out there with the fans at College Game Day, having a couple early morning beers.
Maybe.
Is it too late to add this to the lawsuit? I'm so serious.
They should. The old commissioner doesn't know anything about his teams at all. He has zero clue about who is at quarterback, bringing in past players like Jordan Travis and matching Jordan Travis with the Miami Hurricanes. Like, how clueless can you actually be?
He went into that interview trying to do it all off the dome, didn't prepare for it whatsoever, didn't have any notes to his side. He's just like, nah, I got this, and then made a mess of himself.
That's 2 weeks in a row now, too. I mean, the conference, to me, them doing all the advocating for of course, SMU, but like Clemson in there. Like, what can you do? And getting Miami in there as well, pushing for that. Like, dude, at that point, definitely give it up. But man, it makes you look so silly and embarrassing. And it's just crazy to me that that guy still has a job at the tier that he has it as. And it's the ACC, though. It's the ACC.
I don't like rooting for people to not have a job, but he should not have a job.
No. I feel like we as us on here, we could do his job. Like, come on, bro. You just got to just at least name the right players, right? Come on. It's as simple as you need to do. But yeah, ugly, ugly, ugly. Let's jump into the last few things here on this episode. We're going to jump into the 2 interviews from Gus Malzahn and Tony White, those 2 talking this morning and their introductory press conferences. Gus Malzahn, now Florida State's offensive coordinator for the Seminoles. We were talking about it whenever he got hired. Definitely came to a surprise to a lot of us when that started getting reported before the UF game. We're like, oh my gosh, Gus Malzahn, how is this going to look? But now we're starting to connect the dots and things are starting to make a lot more sense. But in one of his opening things that he said about joining Florida State and Mike Norvell, saying this is a place where we can win the whole thing. He also talked about how Florida State is going to be running this offense and also to the quarterback room, specifically talking about the quarterback room, feeling like there is talent there that he can work with. But he did mention, though, that this team is likely looking into the transfer portal and going to make some moves there as well.
Yeah, he seemed like an old head coach, speaking to the media to me.
He said that a few times.
Relaxed and pretty comfortable, pretty open with a lot of his answers. I thought, the funniest part was him being asked about losing to Florida State in the 2013 national championship and him basically saying, well, now every day on the way to the office, I've got to walk by a picture of Kelvin Benjamin catching the game-winning touchdown. So that basically sucks. But,
yeah,
he talked a lot about the history of Florida State. You mentioned it, that this is a place where you can win a national championship, and he's really excited to reunite with Mike Norvell. I think you've got some of the numbers, Logan, but whenever Gus and Mike were together back at Tulsa, I mean, they had an insanely explosive offense. And, Gus said, I'm excited to be back with him. We were really good together, and mentioned coming to Florida State that, it was just a great opportunity with all of the resources and the potential here in Tallahassee. But, also talked about Herb Hand, said that he thinks that he's one of, if not the best offensive line coach in college football. And then, also gave his thoughts on Chroma and Javon Boggs as well, 2 guys who signed with Florida State during the early signing period who could make an instant impact in Tallahassee.
Yeah, a lot of the things I liked was him saying that him and Mike still use a lot of the same terminology in their offenses, so that'll make things much more seamless transition for Malzahn trying to install the things he wants to do. I did laugh at him getting asked if they were stealing signs in the 2013 national championship, and I even more appreciated that he lied in that answer. That was awesome. He looks like a coach that's done this for 20 years, and that's exactly what we got in that press conference. I thought it was, a good balance of coach speak that I expected, while also being pretty honest with a lot of answers. And I don't know if I feel any better about where the offense will be next season, but at least I know he knows what he wants to do.
He also pointed out, too, that he will be taking on the play calling duties for Florida State on game days. He said, too, how it was asked how that works with Mike Norvell. As we know, Mike previously taken a hold of those reins, of course, but, now Mike Norvell handing this off. And he said, too, during the week, both him and Mike, Herb Hand, and the rest of the offensive staff, they're going to work together and creating a good game plan and getting that play call sheet put together. And then when you hit the field, it is going to be Gus on that sideline calling the plays. And this is where we're starting to see, and I'm interested to see, I wish I was there more hands-on in Tallahassee, but just we're starting to see that role shift a little bit now for Mike Norvell. And I, wonder in some aspects and some of these departments, we're going to see get into a way better footing. Mike Norvell is really good of, I think, managing a lot of different roles. I feel like he's been one of the best in order to do that until his loyalty killed him here at the end of this 2024 season. But he is definitely a mastermind and working things as a whole for a program. And I'm interested to see what this entails with Mike being a little bit more not so hands-on and allowing Gus to take on this important role as being a play caller and setting up as an offensive coordinator overall for FSU.
Yeah, it's definitely a transition, that we're going to be watching closely and, getting a chance to go back out there for spring practice and, seeing how this offense develops and, maybe how it looks a little bit different than it did before. But, as Gus talked about, and you said, a lot of the same concepts, a lot of the same things he uses, Norvell uses. So I don't think that it's going to be some totally different offensive system, but just having Gus here, who has just done it for so long, produced top offenses at different programs around the country, and the guy who Mike Norvell, his coaching tree, that's where it all began. Having them together, we'll see if they're able to get it back on track.
And I do appreciate that he said he just loves coaching football, and it's hard to do that as a head coach. And I think that's something we've talked about the last couple of years. Is it's harder and harder just to coach football as a head football coach, and he can do that as an offensive coordinator. I thought that was honestly a pretty good answer for someone that's been doing this as long as he has.
When Norvell and Gus teamed up in Tulsa, they led the nation in total offense in 2007 and ranked second in 2008, averaging nearly 570 yards and 47 points per game. So you would like to see a little bit of that come into Tallahassee.
I'd be shocked, but I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll take it any day of the damn week. After what we saw this last year, I'll take anything. Cut it in half. Give me half of that.
There is a chance they could score more points in 3 games than Florida State did all season. So I'll take it.
And it's not going to be hard to do, to be honest with you. It won't be hard to do. I'll tell you what, Austin, if it ain't looking like that, then the staff won't be together going into 2026. That's for damn sure. Let's go into the last one here of the night, and we're going to talk about Tony White. And he was introduced today, officially Florida State's defensive coordinator, and talking with the media. To me, my first takeaway from him, smooth, calm, and collected kind of guy, was getting to know a little bit of the media too. And he's a guy too that likes to talk about football and his scheme. He's very specific on how he thinks this defense should be ran. He emphasized too a lot on Florida State's tradition and why picking Florida State was one of his options because, Dustin, you put out an article at NoleGameday.com giving out the salary and the contract details for Tony White and him taking a little bit of a pay cut this upcoming year to come coach for Florida State overall. But Tony White emphasizing a lot on Florida State, saying when you talk about Florida State, you talk about one of the true great historic football programs. And then obviously what just happened a couple of years ago with them giving themselves a chance to be in the mix for a national championship. You take the area and the young men that you're able to recruit down here. I think there are some of the best football players in the country are from this area regionally, and young men that you're able to recruit. And then when you're able to coaches, I don't even know what's happening. I don't even know. I just lost. I guess my copy and paste just actually repeated exactly it twice.
Good job.
And then just the way coaches put stuff together down there. I think I found it there at the end of that. But anyways, he's excited to be in Tallahassee playing or coaching for Florida State. And I'm excited to see this defense moving forward.
Yeah, he was awesome, man. I thought he killed that press conference and, had some really insightful answers. And, the biggest thing was him talking about the history of Florida State. And he said that he was walking through the Moore Athletic Center with Terrence Knighton and Evan Cooper and saw just the number of ACC championships that Florida State had won in program history, and basically just, talked about how amazing that was, and seeing the NFL draft picks and all of the different things that Florida State has produced over the years. Sounds like he's excited to be a part of this program. He didn't know that FSU was building, a new football only facility and doing upgrades at Doak Campbell Stadium. He said that's going to be a game changer for the current players and the guys that they're recruiting whenever those are completed here later, early in 2025, but man, moving to the 3-3-5 defense, he talked about that, said that he believes that it's an easy scheme for players to pick up, and they want to attack offenses in multiple ways. And he says, even though you're playing defense, you want to be the one to attack. So I think you're going to have an aggressive style here of defense under Tony White. It's going to, show offenses different looks, and we'll see. He's been very productive, obviously, at Syracuse, at Nebraska, produced some of the top defenses in the country, and he's got a heck of a job to do here at Florida State.
Yeah, y'all know me. I normally hate coach press conferences, but that was a pretty damn good one. That was the best I've seen in years, maybe a decade. Okay. It was good, man. I enjoyed it.
I got the endorsement from VZ on the
because usually I have something else going on the TV while I'm doing work on my laptop, and I actually paused what I was doing on my TV to watch the entire press conference. That's never happened. But I liked it. I liked his energy. I mean, like you said, he was interacting with every media member, wanting them to feel welcome. He wanted to feel welcome with them. You talked about how he just wants to be an attacking defense, wants to be violent, wants to be fast. And even when asked about the 3-3-5 defense, he's like, hey, that may not be the right personnel for this team. We're going to figure that out as we go through the offseason. I like that a guy that's been so well known for his 3-3-5 is like, hey, may not be what's best for this team, and we'll figure that out, and we'll get these guys playing the right way. And I just like that. It was a very, very good press conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of pieces that he has to figure out, and I like that he's just going to wait. Let's see what happens here after the transfer portal goes through for Florida State and the attrition as we're seeing right now, and then what they're going to end up doing for the transfer portal. Then we'll start figuring out what personnel fits best. He feels very high on Florida State secondary. He says there's a lot of young talent there, got to build some more experience. And he also talked about the linebacker room too, mentioning that he thinks there's a lot of athleticism in that group. But yeah, he's got a big job to fill. Just going through that presser and watching it, there in the back of my brain, I'm like, man, there's quite a bit here that Florida State needs to do right defensively, and it's about getting down this new scheme, and then Florida State attacking offenses, and don't let them just do things to you all throughout the 4 quarters that we've seen in years past. And I wish someone should have brought up to third down defense and how important that is to every Florida State fan, so then we don't have to call you third and white. Hope that doesn't end up being the case for FSU anymore.
Yeah, we've had third and Kelly's, we've had third and Fuller's. Am I missing one? I'm sure I am.
We used to give Hampton a little bit, third and Hampton's a little bit. He slipped through.
I just try to forget about that entire era.
Yeah, that was third and cut your eyes out and don't watch anymore.
That wasn't just third down. That was the entire game.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I thought these were 2 good pressers. It was funny. Y'all were saying about like Gus being the older coach, but you could just definitely see the difference with Gus coming in and Tony coming in. There's the differences in how they speak and the way that they talk and answer questions.
This is going to sound crazy. Maybe it's just the way he looked. Gus reminded me of George W. Bush. I don't know what. Maybe it was the gray hair and the way he talked, but like as soon as he popped up on screen. No, really what it was is I saw a picture.
Damn, I wish you could have a chance to talk with Gus Malzahn. If we ever get him on the show, I'm just going to say that, hey, by the way.
I saw a picture on Twitter. I'm like, what am I looking at here? And then it took me 10 seconds to realize that was Malzahn and not George W. Bush.
With an FSU spear logo on.
It was because he didn't have the visor. He didn't have on a sweater vest.
Yeah, the visor would help.
He didn't have on the typical Malzahn stuff. So I'm like, I really thought that was George W. Bush. I was so confused.
Yep, visor's back. We had the Willie Taggart visor come in. We're going to have the Gus Malzahn visor. We got to get him a visor ASAP. A spear one, I think, would be just perfect for Gus, and a vest. I need to see him wearing a vest as well.
He already gave one to Mike because Mike was rocking it. Was it last week or earlier in the week?
Yeah, might have handed it off. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for us this week. Unless there's any basketball you want to hit on, or we can just save that for next week. Save it for next week.
I'm still mad after being at that game.
Yeah, we'll let the mad go through, and hopefully things change there. But yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Before you leave, I think we're at like 15,020 subscribers. Kind of going pretty quickly as we speak. But make sure you hit that subscribe button. Then hit the bell right next to that, because then it will give you notification whenever we drop a new episode, or if there's any kind of breaking news, we'll go live here and it will notify you on your phone. But hit that subscribe button. We got at least 3 to 4 videos going out daily for you, and we're spending a lot of time trying to grow this community and going to put a lot of focus into it going into 2025. But yeah, appreciate everybody listening. Enjoy the rest of y'all's week, and we'll talk to you guys next week on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Peace.